All right. Sorry for the little delayed start. You can kind of see me here. I'll probably switch to a different classroom that has like a little webcam for most classes. I was up a couple floors and they're doing work outside. And it was just insanely loud. So if the audio is a little bit loud, I apologize of them working, but hopefully we don't have to deal with that every single day. So just before we kind of get started here, can everybody hear me okay? And if you want, you can kind of type in the chat, or if any brave soul wants to unmute their mic. Okay, I'm seeing an emoji floating over here. Okay, so this is Econ B251. So I've got kind of the Canvas page pulled up here. I changed it right before class started. Oh, clicking the wrong tab. Select the wrong one. Here's what I want. This is what I meant to change to right before class started. So you can kind of see the module one will be some of the materials that I'm using today. They're also just links. You can find them to the Canvas page. So before we kind of get going into all of that, just a little bit kind of preamble. So this is a web-based class. It's going to take me a day or two. I'm sure there'll be a couple technical difficulties to get used to teaching again on web-based. I primarily, since COVID, knock on wood, been teaching in-person classes. So, I'm remembering how all of this Zoom technology and everything works. But every single day, Monday through Friday, got these links created to have a Zoom so you can watch the lectures live. So I'm Professor Lantis. This will be my third year here at IU. I'm teaching B251. So this is Introduction to Microeconomics, basically. I think the actual name is Fundamentals of Economics for Business 1. So we're primarily going to be looking at microeconomics. So a couple of things before we jump into really doing some syllabus review, just about the nature of the course. We have a meeting time, and I think it's probably best if you show up during that meeting time. But it's not going to be my expectation that you are able to every single day. I understand the attractiveness of this course may be that it doesn't have to be that you're attending live every single day. And so I'm using Zoom, not only because it can get all of us in, you can watch the live lecture, but also I can record it. So I'm currently recording, and we'll post this to a YouTube playlist. So I think I've got the link right here. We don't want to listen to this. And I've got like a placeholder video, so don't worry about this video. This is actually an old one. I just kind of put it up there so that the playlist would be accessible prior to today. After today's class, I'll post the recording. I'll get rid of this old video, so you'll have like day one's video. And this will be where I post every single recording. So every day after class, I'll go back to my office, takes 10 minutes to compile. I'll post it to the YouTube playlist. So if you aren't able to attend class live, you can always kind of find the recordings here and watch them at a later time that's suits your schedule. Or if you just wanted to review, right, go back and what did he say about this? And you can always kind of go back and watch these videos. Okay. So get rid of YouTube for now. And once again, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, but if you want to at any point in time, stop me. I'm used to someone raising a hand, the visual cues, or someone kind of speaking up. So don't feel shy. Unmute your mic, ask a question if I say anything you have a question on, or I'll try to keep an eye on this chat box as well. Excuse me. So with this in mind, being a web-based class, but I really want to try to make it as close of a substitute as in-person class as possible. So I'll mention a couple things along the way that I think hopefully I will, have that available to you. So we'll start here though. And I'll kind of briefly go through the syllabus. The file is up on Canvas, and you can go through it in more detail on your own time if you want to. I think it's probably beneficial to kind of give it a good skim, kind of read through, but I'll kind of hit, cliff note it for you and give you the main takeaway. So what are you going to need for this class? The main required materials, the first one is going to be this e-text, okay? So this is going to be, the text for this book is through Top Hat. We'll also use Top Hat to do some small assignments. And so it is a requirement for this class. There are points associated with some of the questions asked here, and I'll show you what those assignments look like here in just a second. But you will need this e-text, and I'll have some steps on how to kind of register and everything here in a second as well. Obviously, being a web-based class, you'll need some way to access either live the lectures, or after the fact, access YouTube to be able to watch the recordings. And then all of the communication I do is primarily going to be through Canvas, right? So any announcement I have for class, obviously say things in class in these recordings, but anything I think is really important and I want to emphasize, I'll use Canvas to kind of put those announcements out as well. Sometimes reiterating things I said in class, but that will be another really important kind of material, I guess, for this course. I've got some, a link to something that has some additional microeconomics slides, examples you might find helpful. You'll need this is a little bit more important when it comes to like in person, but you'll need some type of a calculator for the exams, for the quizzes, homeworks. This could be, Microsoft Excel on your computer, but just something to kind of do. We won't do anything too crazy. I said 4 function here because really we're not going to do anything other than addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Okay. Kind of goes hand in hand with having access to Canvas is every single day before class, I'm going to post the skeleton version of the slides. Okay. So these skeleton notes will have some things missing, some blank slides, which is typically then where I'll do some work on the dot cam. So today we'll get a little bit of taste of what that looks like towards the end of the class. I'll do some work for you on the dot cam here. Those will always be in the recordings. And then after class, I'll generally post a complete version of the slides. It will often have things that replace what I did in the dot cam, but they won't be as extensive. I also tend to add some things in when I'm doing work on the dot cam that won't end up being in those images. And so really to get everything that I'm doing in class, you would need to be watching those recordings and writing down those things that I'm doing on the dot cam, right? Or watching them if you can store them in your memory that well. I put up here, excuse me, and hopefully a lot of you already have found it. It was in that announcement on Canvas, but this will be kind of our virtual class meeting link. And then just to make sure we don't, inevitably someone somehow finds their way in if I don't put a code on these. So the code is just going to be this section, 4935, right? So those of you who are here, obviously figured this out, but every single day that'll be our virtual classroom link, okay? I already showed you the YouTube playlist. That's where I'll put all the recordings. Another easy way to find this, if you don't have this link or want to go back to the slides to find it or the syllabus, just search Professor Lannis, and I'm the first. So right here, if we go to YouTube, search Professor Lannis, I'm the first one that comes up, right? And then I've got 2 sections this summer. So here's my other section, 4296. Not sure why the other one's not showing up right away, but if we go to playlists, all right, both those playlists are right there, my 2 summer sections, okay? This is 4935, and here's the other one. The recordings, I'll keep both of them from each class, but we're going to be covering the same material, okay? So with that in mind, one thing, I'm going to skip ahead here. Where did I put it? Did I not put it down further? I'm going to go out of order because I think it's worthwhile. So I'm going to go on to slide 12. I'm going to throw this out there. There's really no reason why you shouldn't be able to do this, and I might as well make things as accessible to you as possible. I want you to do as well as you can in this class. So I mentioned I have another section. If for whatever reason there's a day, I'm assuming this section, maybe this time works for you. If on a certain day it doesn't, and it works better for you to come watch the live lecture at 11:15 to 12:30, I'll also be having that. I put the link to that virtual class meeting as well. And the only difference is that course Zoom code is going to be 4296. Okay? So you should be able to get into this one, I believe, using this link and then using this code, but that's going to only run from 11:15 to 12:30. So just an alternative live option if for whatever reason on a certain day you wake up early, I don't know, and you want to get it out of the way, we'll be covering the same material in each section, okay? Any questions on that before we kind of dive into more of how you're graded? Okay. Okay, I just want to give you guys a second just in case. I also think that the audio is working on here, and now I'm worrying because no one's talking. So let me see. Okay. No one's unmuted. Okay, perfect. So, so how are you graded, right? What do you probably really care about in this class is how are you going to get the grade that you want? So, admittingly, this is a pretty heavy weighted with exams, kind of typical to this course offering in the in the spring and fall semesters. So you'll have 2 midterms and a final exam in this class. The final worth a little bit more because it's going to have a few more questions and it's a little bit more comprehensive. So each midterm will be worth 22%. The final's worth 26. I'll talk more about these exams when I get kind of to the end of reviewing the syllabus, but that's going to be where the bulk of your grade comes from. So these exams are very important. Preparing for them is very important. And I've got a couple things that I kind of bake in that I think will be some additional resources you can use to do well on these. So these are, I always think of exams like everything in life is, effort and your ability. So these are probably more ability based. Now, obviously, the effort you put into before the exam is going to help you get some more of these points. But I kind of view this as like, this is really how well do you understand the material. Some of the other categories, I think, although they do measure ability, weight effort a little bit more, right? So every single chapter that we work through, and instead of chapter, we'll generally call these modules, we'll have a corresponding quiz. So I call these the Canvas quizzes. They're all on Canvas. They're 12-question quizzes, and you have an hour to take them. Right? So they're going to be worth 18% of your overall grade. And I'll have another slide. We'll go more in depth in this in a second. But each module, you will have a Canvas quiz associated with it. Right? You'll also have class readings. These are what are done through Top Hat. They're questions that are embedded into the text. And every single one, you answer the questions, you get half credit for just answering them, half credit for getting them right. These are quite a bit easier than quiz and exam questions. I say quite a bit. If you put the time into this, as long as you do them, like you don't miss the due date, most people get 95% of these points, right? So this is a lot more effort based. Just it doesn't seem like much, but 4% that makes the difference between you getting it, B plus, A minus, right? Kind of jumps you up to that next category. So really try to kind of help your grade out by doing these effort based points. The other one that's just effort based, and these are, I think, even easier as long as you're keeping up with the class this summer, which I realize can be kind of difficult, are, like I said, class participation attendance. They're going to be daily Canvas quizzes associated with what we cover in class, and it'll be a couple questions, 2 or 3 questions. I'll even show you the one today before we get out of here. And it's going to be questions I work through in these live lectures / recordings that I literally will give you the answers to. So as long as you're watching them, these should be points you can easily get all of, right? Now, if you don't watch and you forget, oh, I got to get this done, before the due date, and you get it on 10 minutes, you might get some of them wrong. But as long as you're watching the lecture or watching the recordings, these should be really easy points. And that's 8% of your grade. I mean, that's a good portion. You can bump your grade up quite a bit by these simple effort points. Okay. So we'll dive into these categories a little bit more in depth here. So Canvas quizzes, right? There's going to be 12 of them. So we've got we'll go through 13 modules, right, in the book, but I'm going to combine modules 5 and 6. So there'll essentially be 12 quizzes throughout the semester. I put here they're due Sundays. This is a little bit of a caveat to this. They are due at the end of the day Sunday. Although if we cover the material the week of an exam, they will be due the night before that exam. Once I give you some dates about the exams in a second, this will make a little bit more sense. But generally, it's like the end of the week, you have to have these quizzes done. That means it gives you a little flexibility. If you do want to catch up, say on Thursday, you didn't watch any of the lectures, those quizzes aren't due until Sunday. So you can watch the lectures a couple days late, then review the material and still get on and get that quiz done by the end of the day Sunday. I'll always post the quiz after we finish covering the modules material after that class. And I actually put 12:30 here just because I forgot to change this from my other section. So they'll be posted after this class, which ends at 3:15. I put 3:30 because I've got to get back to my office. So there might be a slight delay. I'll probably have it. You might say, why don't I put on automatic? Well, I just worry sometimes if we don't quite cover some of the material I thought, I might change a question at the, the very last question, or take a question off or something like that. Usually that doesn't happen, but this just gives me a little bit of wiggle room. So I'll post it after we finish covering that module's material. It'll be due by the end of that next Sunday. Once again, if it's an exam week, to do the night before the exam. Late quizzes, no exceptions will count as zeros. Now, I do two things, right? So even if you miss a quiz and get a zero, it's not the end of the world, in that we have 12 quizzes, but I only take your best 10. So if you, for whatever reason, miss 2 of them, you can still get full credit, right? Because missing 2, those would be zeros, those would be your lowest, those would get dropped, okay? So, excuse me. So I would not suggest that. I would suggest doing all 12, because inevitably you might not do well on 1 or 2 of the quizzes, and you would like those to get dropped, right? You don't want a 50% on one of the quizzes to count towards your grade. Well, if you get a 50% on, say, module 9, but you skip module 10, 11, well, the module 10, 11 are going to be your lowest zeros. Those get dropped. Now that 50% counts. So do all of the quizzes, and then me dropping your 2 lowest will only improve your grade, okay? So 10 quizzes, 180 points, 18% of your grade. Each one will be worth 1.8%. Okay. So I think I have all these set to be 12 questions. So it's what, 1.5 points per question, basically. Okay. Any questions on that before we keep moving? Also, I'm getting paranoid. Anyone want to type in the chat just to make sure everyone's hearing me okay and can see everything okay here? Yes. Okay. Thank you. No, it's good when there's nothing going bad, but also if I don't see anything, I get a little worried sometimes. So, the next thing that I've already mentioned are these class readings or module questions. Oops. So instead of 12, like the quizzes, will have 11 of these, because I generally want you to do these before we cover the material. You obviously couldn't do that today. We're going to cover some module 1 material. I didn't want to have you an assignment due before we even meet day 1. And so there's only going to be 11 of these. I'll still take your best 10, so I'm dropping your lowest. And then similar to the quizzes, we're going to combine module 5 and 6. So once we get to this point, I'll only have you do a module reading for module 6. Okay. Not a huge percent of your overall grade. Once again, these should be pretty easy effort-based points. In fact, I'll show you in a second once you get to Top Hat, and I'll show you what the course looks like. There's the join code. Kind of get registered for that. Now, I would not click on these links to register, so hold off if you're currently going to do it as I'm talking. When you register for Top Hat, what makes it easiest so that nothing goes wrong is if on the left-hand side here, you click the Top Hat link on the left side of Canvas. This guarantees that your account gets auto-synced right up to Canvas, so your grades will kind of get carried over automatically. If you don't do that, it's not the end of the world. We can get them linked up. It just might be a little bit of a hiccup, and there might be a couple days where it doesn't auto-sync for you. But to guarantee that is seamless, I would click on this left-hand side of the Top Hat link. See if we actually do this here. It'll take me there. Pop-up block. So open it up. Oh. There we go. So yours will look a little bit different because this is an instructor view, but excuse me. In fact, I forget how to do student view. It's not that important, but basically it'll look very similar to you. You'll have all these modules. You can't see all of them yet because I think I have some of them not to be available until we kind of get closer to covering them. But as of right now, you should be able to see kind of this module 1. It's set to review, so you should be able to kind of go through it. So you'll see like here's question 1. So here's the beginning of the text. Question 1, what words do you think of? This one, I said it's half point if you get it correct, half if you just respond. This one, there's no right or wrong answer. So you actually get full credit just for responding to this question. Now, not this one because I said module 1 doesn't count, but if this was module 2. And then kind of as you go through, you'll see there's some more questions here. Let's take a look at module 2. In fact, you should be able to. I'll have this kind of. I'll just do it right now since we're talking about it. We're going to do it after class, but we can do it here. All right. So I'll start to get up the subsequent modules. In fact, if we go to assignments here, should already be right here. So here's module 2, 3, and 4, kind of already published here. We go here, that's what those links would take you to. So I now have this one available. Usually, I would have these modules set to be due before we start covering them in class. So just to give you a little bit of a roadmap, this first couple of weeks is a little different because we're starting out and because of July 4th. So today we're going to do module 1. We should and syllabus review, but we should get through all of that today, no problem. There might be a little bit at the end that we start with tomorrow's class, finish up module 1, but it won't take us more than 10 minutes tomorrow. So we've got that, and then tomorrow and Wednesday, we'll do module 2. Thursday, Friday, we'll do module 3. Next Monday, Tuesday, we'll do module 4. Each exam has 4 modules on it, essentially. All right. And when I say that, we combine 5 and 6. So kind of think of that as one module. After Tuesday's class, we'll have covered all the material. Wednesday will be a review class. So I will come in, I'll have posted a set of exam review questions. I'll get those up maybe even later this evening, so that they're out there well in advance. But I'll do review of a bunch of practice problems that Wednesday, and then next Thursday will be that first midterm exam. So exams are going to be about every 2 weeks, right? It's a 6-week class. Okay, we can. If you have questions about kind of Top Hat, I'm going to talk that at the end. It should be. You do have to pay for it. It is an e-text, but if that's paid through, for different people through, I don't know, the bursar or whatever, then that's something I can kind of help you with. Let me make sure. Okay, yeah, usually it should be automated, but you do need the code that I put on that slide to kind of get into the right class. And I don't think it should be that much. So if you're having troubles with that, reach out to me after class, and I'll talk about how to do that in a second. Lost my so that's kind of what that first 2 weeks will look like. And then from there on out, every 2 days will be a module. Then we'll have a review day. And then the next midterm would be on a Friday, 2 days for every module, or review day, and then that final exam. So the first 2 weeks looks a little bit different just because of July 4th, and we don't have class next Friday, or wouldn't be able to meet next Friday. So just wanted to show you a little bit of what that looks like. So once again, some of these are just opinion based, right? You can get full credit easily. Some of them are going to be more like multiple choice, and it's usually related to whatever was covered right before the question. So they're embedded into the text so that even if you're not going through it with a fine-tooth comb, if you're kind of skimming, reading this, okay, what are they talking about here? Moving from point A to point E. How do I determine opportunity costs? Okay, well, here's a question that's very similar to how they calculated it up here. Sometimes, excuse me, some of the information might be right below the questions, but it's all going to be kind of embedded in the embedded right where it talks about it in the e-text. Okay. So those will be due before we start class. So you'll notice here, module 2 usually would be due before we start class tomorrow, but we're just starting out. I want to give it, a little bit of grace. Get registered for Top Hat, figure out how to use it. That module reading won't be due until we start class Wednesday, but from there on out, every module reading is due right before we cover that material in class. So module 3, I said we're going to start on Thursday, so it'll be due before we meet in class Thursday. Module 4, we're going to start on Monday, so that's due before we start class on Monday. And then so on. And I'll add more and more of these modules. I kind of have a template course a little behind inside baseball, behind the scenes. I kind of build out the template and then I kind of copy paste things throughout the semester. I like to hold off a little bit just in case something happens where I don't have to go back and change all the dates. And so here I've only kind of went up to the first exam. All right. Oh, you can also see here, I've got kind of these quizzes that I mentioned. So the module 1, module 2 quiz will kind of be set to release as soon as we cover that material. Module 1, I had it not to kind of release after tomorrow, since I think we'll probably have to finish module 1 at the very beginning of class. And then module 2, once we finish it on Wednesday, it'll be kind of released. and then those are due at the end of the day. Sunday, module 3 and 4, right? I'm not going to make module 3, even though we cover it this week. I won't make it due at the end of the day. Sunday, I'm actually going to give you a little bit more time. I try to give you some, as much flexibility with dates and things in this class, but those are both going to be due Wednesday night next week before we have that exam on the 3rd. Okay. So what's everyone's? Yeah, if you have questions with the top hat, I might have to do these kind of off the live lecture to kind of help individual people. But I'm not ignoring those. I just want to make sure you don't think I'm ignoring you. So quizzes, module readings, any questions related to those before we keep moving, other than the payment issue? Okay. All right. So I think I briefly mentioned these already, but one way you can get really easy points in this class are going to be these participation or attendance quizzes. So every lecture, I will post a quiz right after lecture. In fact, I'll post it during lecture because we're going to be going through the questions together in class. Okay? Sometimes I'll do this at the beginning, middle, end, just kind of depends on what the questions are and what we're talking about that day. There should be 24 of them, right? Only 20 of them will count towards your grade. So similar to the quizzes, I'll drop your 4 lowest, which means you could miss 4 of them. You could forget to do 4 of them, and it still won't count against you as long as you do the remaining 20. Now, this also means that if little things come up, like a family commitment or something where you aren't able to get the quiz done on time, although you should have plenty of time to kind of get on in a 24-hour period, I would think, roughly 24 hours. But those are what those 4 days I have kind of baked in there are there for, right? That if something comes up, I'm not making judgment calls, a daily sickness that kind of keeps you in bed for a day, a family commitment. Those are going to be those 4 that I drop. If you have an extenuating circumstance, obviously I will work with you and we can come up with an alternative plan. If it's something that, I don't even know what it would be. But I'll give you an example that I had in a prior semester. Someone had like a very bad car accident and a very bad concussion and couldn't look at a screen for like a week. Well, obviously, if these are on these participation quizzes are posted to Canvas, they weren't able to kind of look up the screen, and so we worked something out, right? I think however many they missed, instead of 20 out of 24, I graded them out of like 16 out of the 20 that they could get on and take, or whatever the case may be. Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis, but hopefully nobody needs something like that this semester. Okay. They will be posted to Canvas. So I'll even post the first one right now. Like I said, I'll probably do it during class most days. So I've got this one ready to go. So we're going to go to quiz, participation quiz. I'll publish it. And then typically we'll look at it, right? Now, usually this is after we've covered some material in class. And I'll usually go to like a preview mode here so that we can kind of work on them without seeing the correct answer in advance. And we'll talk about this question before we get out of here today, but this would be the second question. And I'll revisit this after we cover the material, but I just want to give you an idea of what they look like. So this is one that we've really already talked about, right? So we've now talked about everything that counts towards your grade. So we have module readings, we have these daily participation quizzes, and we have these these weekly module quizzes that are due at the end of every week, right? We're also going to have midterm exams. We have 2 midterms and final. We don't have a research paper, so that's going to be the one that does not count toward our final grade. It doesn't exist, right? If we're paying attention and listening to the lecture, that's not something that was mentioned. Now, you could probably already also get this if you just looked at the slides and realized, oh, there's no research paper mentioned. So you could probably answer these without watching the live lecture all the time, or if you go through the slides yourself and you really understand the material without me even talking about it, maybe you could get the other question correct as well, right? But if you watch them, I can guarantee you that you'll know what the correct answer is. Okay, so we'll kind of revisit question 1 here after we talk about marginal costs and marginal benefits. A little bit more syllabus stuff. So I already mentioned I will use Canvas to post announcements get information out to you between classes. This class moves fast since we have it every day. So if there's something that I forget to mention or someone brings up to me that I think everyone might want to have, I might should reiterate to everybody, or something I mentioned in class that I think I want to make sure if you didn't attend class, you know about, I'll use Canvas to post those announcements. Okay. We also have a TA for this course. So I'll show you the syllabus in a second. It's got some more information about their office hours. If you have questions, always feel free to email me. So rlantis@iu, you can always email me. You can always ask a question in these live recordings, I guess, if we want to call them. And I will kind of mention my office hours in a second as well. But you can always reach out to the TA first, especially if it's content related questions. They can likely help you. They might get back to you a little bit quicker because I've got multiple sections. And I've got some things that I'm working on during the day. I might not always be able to respond as quickly as they are. So please feel free to direct your emails to them first. And then if they can't answer your question, they'll send them to me. You can always email me directly. I usually I'm a little more hesitant with that when I've got, the 300-person lectures, but in the summer with a smaller section, you can email me and I'll probably get to you pretty quick. So here's the YouTube playlist again, just putting in there multiple places so you can find it. This is just kind of a catch-all, just to kind of, before we start talking about issues, we're going to have a lot of discussions throughout the semester, and our goal is never to say what's right or wrong necessarily in this class in terms of like what should be done politically or what is right or wrong morally. All we're trying to do is understand the implications of different decision making. So it may touch on some topics that people can turn into hotly debated topics. So, taxing decisions, pollution, different types of economic structures, capitalism versus communism. We're not here to say whether one is right or wrong. We're just here to kind of understand the implications of each one of them. Right? More often than not, the answer in economics, we can understand all the moving parts, and usually the answer is going to be, well, what's the right thing to do? And it depends, right? It depends what people value. It depends on a lot of factors that are subject to change day to day. And so try not to get, let's get heated about things. Like I said, we could talk about something like pollution and taxing. So like, is it, people get mad. Oh, they're taxed. I forget what was in Europe. They tax plastic bags, and how dare you tax things so people can get their groceries home? Well, why do they tax them, right? Because by taxing something, what do people do? They buy less of it. Well, if it's plastic bags and a lot of those end up getting thrown away, what ends up happening? There's less trash in the landfill, right? And that's better for that society, or people don't just let them fly out the window or whatever. There's less pollution. So we're not here to say whether one thing is right or wrong. We're just here to understand kind of the implications of these different actions. Okay. That being said, one more thing from this syllabus I do want to mention are the exams. So the only thing in this class that you really have to make sure you have dates available for. So like I said, you don't have to be at every live lecture. The due dates for quizzes and things give you some flexibility to being able to watch them later, even a day later. However, the exams, you need to have that day available. So exam 1 is next Thursday. I put during class here, July 3rd. We'll talk more about it as we get closer to that date. But basically, it's not just during class time. I actually extended it to be a little bit longer. So if you do have some, things come up, you can have a little more flexibility. I want everyone taking it, though, at the same time, and not too long of a time so that there's answers out there and things. So it's in between the times of my 2 classes. So instead of just being able to take the exam next Thursday, July 3rd, from 2 to 3:15, you can take it from 11:15 to 3:15. So a 4-hour time block. You can start it at any point. It's going to be on Canvas. You can start it at any point during that time block. And once you start, you'll have 1 hour and 15 minutes to complete it. Okay. So that'll be next Thursday, but it has to be July 3rd between 11:15 and 3:15. Same thing is true about exam 2. It'll be 11:15 to 3:15, July 18th. And then August 1st, the very last day of this class, that Friday, same kind of idea. You'll get on between 11:15 and 3:15 to take that final exam. Now that one will be a little different. Once you start that one, instead of 1 hour and 15 minutes, I'll give you up to 2 hours. So you'll kind of have a 2-hour time block that you can choose in that range of when you start and finish it. that should be more than enough time. It's got a few more questions than the midterms, and so I always give a little bit more time. And it's comprehensive, so the questions, arguably as we move through a semester, things get more and more difficult. Okay. Is that clear? Are there any questions about that? Now, you don't have to like log on to Zoom while you're taking these or anything. It's just you have to have that time slot available on those days. That's the only time when those exams will be available. So I keep it kind of consistent with like the rest of the like a regular spring fall semester. There's just 25 multiple choice questions for the midterms, 30 multiple choice questions for the final. Now, as we get closer to those exams, well, this isn't my computer, so I don't have it. I'll bring one. I'll get it posted and I can kind of show you next class. I will post up a practice exam that has similar questions to what you'll see on that final. So in fact, I can kind of show you. I already have those up there for, let's go module 2 because it's a little bit more. So before every exam, you'll have a set of practice problems and solution or an answer key so that you can kind of use that to study for the exam, and it should look pretty similar to it. And they'll be on Canvas, just like your kind of weekly quizzes, but it'll be an exam. Right? So those practice problems, I also post a set of practice problems for every single module. So those are good to study for the Canvas quizzes. They're also good to study for the exams, right? So for example, here's module 2's practice problems. They're already up there. I haven't even posted the quiz yet, but you'll notice I kind of leave some of them open-ended in the practice problems. Every question for those on the exams will be multiple choice, but on the weekly quizzes, some of them will be a little bit more like, give me a number, like formula, like what's the opportunity cost of the 15th pair of pants or something like that. A lot of them are multiple choice, but there's a little more variety type of question for those quizzes. They should look really similar to these practice problems though. Like I'm giving you these practice problems for a reason. Notice they even have the same number of questions as the quizzes. Sometimes I'll put a couple more on there just to make sure that you really are understanding kind of the different topics we covered. But these practice problems will be very good study materials for the weekly quizzes themselves, and then the practice problems for the exams, similar kind of thing. Now, what I do for the module quizzes is I not only give you the answer key, which I'll do that for the practice exam as well, so you can kind of see what the answer is. But for the weekly quizzes, I will also give you a solutions file, which is basically just me writing out what the solutions are to every single question on those practice problems, but like more in depth, right? How you would actually go through and solve them. So I can't stress enough, before you take these weekly quizzes, I would first sit down, go through the practice problems, see how many I can get right or wrong. The ones that I get wrong, go to the answer key, see if I can figure out why the correct answer is what it is. If I need even more help from there, I can go to that solutions file. Okay. And if I'm feeling pretty comfortable with every question after doing that, I should be ready to take that quiz and should do pretty well. Okay. Now, if you ever get to one, I still don't understand what Professor Landis is doing here in the that's where reach out to me. Feel free. I want you guys to ask questions as we go. But those would be kind of your holy grail for studying for those module quizzes. And then that practice exam that I end up hosting to Canvas should be kind of your holy grail for studying for that first midterm and subsequent midterms. Any other questions there? Okay. Let me see where we're at. I already mentioned this alternative live option. So a couple things, right? I've probably already said some of this, but I'll stress it again. The reason why I make those module readings due before we cover the material, and I did fail to say this as well. In those module readings, you get 2 attempts at every question. So even if you get it wrong the first time, you get a second attempt. So it makes it even more likely you can get all of those points. So it's not really meant for me to test your complete understanding of the material before we cover it in class, right? I'm not expecting that you have everything down and understand everything amazing. It's more for me to prime your brain so that you have a good base for what we're going to talk about. So you've got some of the terminology down, you have somewhat of an idea about how things might work, and then in class or during the live lectures when I go through it, it's kind of me polishing out like what you didn't understand, or just even if you know diving into like, okay, I kind of understand this, like the idea of this, but I need a better explanation, and I can kind of get it from class, and then it, you know, it's not like I'm starting from having absolutely no knowledge about that topic. So read the book, do those module questions and readings. It's also easy points. Show up to class. I would highly suggest, you know, watching these lectures live so that you can ask questions. If you don't want to, once again, you don't have to. But this show up to class thing also, the reason why it's important is because those participation quizzes, easy questions. Like I said, I'll give you the answers in the class. Like as long as you're watching these recordings, you should be able to get some really easy points there. But also, this also kind of means like show up to class, but prepared, right? Like I see sometimes people, some students, if I'm walking around near campus, you know, it's Starbucks watching a live lecture while they've got 5 other tabs open. They've got, I don't know, a book in front of them they're kind of looking at, or their phone. Make sure you give yourself an environment where you can focus on this and treat this like it would be a typical kind of class that you have to physically be at. Otherwise, it's going to be easy to fall behind quick. I mean, this class in the summer moves so quick. All right, so make sure you're giving yourself an environment where you can learn. Okay. I already mentioned this one with all the practice problems, but going through those practice problems, eventually the practice exams, these are just doing more, working through more problems. That's how you're going to get better at understanding this material. You can listen to me talk about it probably 3 or 4 different ways, but actually working through the problems yourself is really where I think the learning kind of sticks and sinks in. Okay. Take those Canvas quizzes seriously. So you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Like do all of them. Don't just miss 2 because you know 2 get the lowest get dropped. Because inevitably when you do that, now I don't do well on one of them, and now I'm, oh, Professor Landis, like I missed 2 and do 1. Well, no, it's your lowest 2. So you know, do all of them so that your lowest 2 are the ones you do bad at, and you don't have any zeros in there. Oh, also in taking these seriously, what I would mention is on the exams, it's not going to be as easy or as a directive. Like you've got a little bit less time per question. So you have a little more time on these Canvas quizzes. Like you have a little bit more, you know, I just think I wouldn't just brush them off because 18% of your overall grade is still a pretty good amount. It's actually pretty close to almost like a midterm exam. So take them seriously because the total weight of them is, you know, almost like an exam itself. Okay. Also, these Canvas quizzes, even if you get some wrong, this is where the learning is also going to take place. So when you take these Canvas quizzes, the ones you get wrong, make sure you're reviewing those and understanding why you got it wrong. And if you don't, those would be good ones to come to me and ask questions on so that you're really prepared for the exam. This is, you know, unfortunate it is sometimes the best way to learn is by failing, but failing on a question or 2 in these Canvas quizzes doesn't impact your grade near as much. And if you can understand from that failure, then being successful on the exam is going to, you know, help your grade out by even more. Okay? Don't be afraid to ask questions. So once again, the chat, but always feel free to unmute your audio if you have a question and kind of stop me, you know, as I'm going through things. I think that the audio might not be working on this computer. I had to once again switch classrooms, so I wasn't able to check this one earlier because they were doing all that work outside. But the usual kind of setup that I have and will be using, I know the audio works fine, so I should be able to hear you then. So ask questions during these live lectures, or, you know, if you don't want to talk in front of everybody or it's kind of a weird, you know, kind of clunky, I'll always have office hours Monday through Thursday, 10 to 11 a.m. and then 12:30 to 1, right? Now I'll be around other times. So if that doesn't work for you and you want to set up an appointment to meet, we can do that. Generally, I'll be the most available between 9 and 4 every day. That includes Fridays though as well. I should have, you know, we've got class Friday. I should have some time Friday to meet. instead of having office hours set, I might, leave those open just for a little bit more like by appointment. Excuse me. During these time slots, my virtual office hour link is here, and then my TA, they have office hours. Here's their virtual office hours link. I don't want to do this from memory because I will inevitably get it wrong. So let's go to the syllabus. I believe their office hours are 3:30 to 5:30. Yes. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So they've got some office hours Friday when I don't. And then I have office hours Monday, Tuesday when they don't. And then we overlap. Okay. All right. So we talked about that already. There's no other questions. We'll kind of dive into some that's not what to hit. Sorry. There we go. There's no other questions. We'll kind of dive back into the slides here. Give it a second to make sure there's nothing that pops up in the chat. Okay. So what is economics, right? So at its core, it's basically going to be how do people make decisions facing scarce or limited resources, right? So most people think about this as like money, right? So why don't I go out? Let's say, I don't know, my ideal car is I don't know, Cybertruck, right? Why don't I go out and buy a Cybertruck? Because I don't have enough money in the bank, right? I have a limited resource that I've got to, use my money to pay for rent, feed myself, and I don't have enough money to buy this ideal car, right? So I face scarce resources. I've had to, opt for buying other things other than my ideal car. Doesn't always have to be money though. Like a lot of the times it's, well, why don't you go out and I don't know, spend all day down at the upstairs pub, right? Well, because I only have so many hours in the day and I've got to work, right? And I've got only got so many hours in the day and I've got to clean my apartment or whatever it is, right? So it doesn't just have to be money, it can be a scarce resource of time. Now we start to think about things outside just our own lens, like the lens of a firm. Well, firms have to make choices and they have limited workers or people, they have limited materials, right? Why don't I as a company do 50, produce 50 different products? Well, maybe given the amount of workers and materials I have, I can only really produce 20 of those, at least 20 of them well, or something like that. So it's not always just money, but it's how we make decisions with scarce resources. And because we have scarce resources, that means if I choose to do something, I inevitably am choosing not to do something else. The best example of this is with time. If I choose to, I don't know, go to the workout at the gym for an hour, I am not doing a variety of other things with that same hour. Right? I'm giving up that hour and not doing a lot of it. So there's trade-offs. Right? So we're going to try to understand how people make these decisions about what they end up, what they do and why they make certain trade-offs. Now, I won't spend too much time here because, we've got macro, microeconomics. This class is really going to be micro. Macroeconomics is like the study of the economy as a whole. So we're starting to talk about things like inflation, money supply, labor, I guess, labor, the labor force. We're going to focus more on like individual or firm decision making or government decisions here. So micro level decision making, and that's really what this course is going to focus on. So 251 could be called microeconomics, 252 could be called macroeconomics. That's kind of how they're separated. So when we're starting out, initially we'll think a lot about just individual choice, and then we'll kind of slip into more firm choice stuff. And I think we'll see how this can be applied to a lot of different sectors, right? Decisions made in the government sector, education decisions, health decisions that people make, your decision on how much to work, the labor market, so all kinds of things, right? Also, we're going to be looking at a bunch of different economic models and talking about the implications of different things. Underneath all of it, we're assuming that people are acting out of self-interest. Right? We assume that they're rational and they're acting out of self-interest, and so they're only making choices that make them better off. So it doesn't have to just be more money, right? I'm not just always trying to maximize how much money I have. I want to maybe maximize how much time I have, my free time I have, how much happiness I'm getting. And so this is where I think sometimes people will be like, well, people make decisions all the time that aren't out of self-interest, right? I might, I have like a 90-year-old neighbor. I might mow the lawn for them. Why do I do that, right? Doesn't make me better off, right? It takes my time, gives me less time. Well, what would have to be true and we'll end up talking about how we kind of measure happiness in terms of utility. But if I'm choosing to do that, I'm giving up my time, maybe even my money to, spending a little bit of gas that it takes to mow that lawn. It must bring me a certain level, a higher level of happiness than those costs to helping out my neighbor, right? So altruism brings people happiness. And so in doing things for other people, it is self-interested. We don't like to think of it that way, right? But I'm only doing it because it brings me happiness or joy, or we end up calling utility, to see these other people being helped, right? And even if, that means by me. Okay. So now if people do act self-interested, not everybody is altruistic. So what can happen? Well, if I'm driving down the road and I have a terrible addiction to fountain drinks, and you know, I finish my 44 ounces of Diet Mountain Dew. I don't want that trash in my car. Well, if I don't care about anything else other than my happiness, I might chuck that out my window, or I want it out of my car. It's trash. Well, if everybody does that, if everybody has that same moral principle where I'm just going to get rid of this, I don't want it in here, I'm going to act out of self-interest, what happens? There's trash all on the highway. It's not what's good for society. So a lot of the time, these self-interested decisions don't end up being what's best for society, or don't maximize social interest. So we'll have this kind of underlying all the models we talk about. We won't really, we're always just going to assume that people or firms or whoever's making the decision are acting out of their own self-interest and choosing what makes them better off. Now, what means better off, that kind of depends, and it'll be a little more context specific. Okay. So the main thing, the two kind of principles I want to make sure we get through in the next 20 minutes here are the idea of marginal costs and benefits, and then opportunity cost. So the first one we'll talk about is opportunity costs. So what is, when we think about costs, I think a lot of times people think about it as the price of something you're buying, right? If I go to the store, what is the cost of a gallon of gas? It's whatever the price is, right? However, when I buy something or I choose to do something, I am not buying or doing something else. I am giving up, right? I'm making a trade-off, right? I'm giving up something else. So the opportunity cost would be the value of the next best alternative. So if I have an hour and I choose to go to the gym, what was the thing that I valued the next most? If I couldn't have went to the gym, what would I have done instead? And how much did I value that? That's my opportunity cost. Because by taking that hour to go to the gym, I'm not doing this other thing. Okay? Another example would be, let's say, I don't know, I've got $10 in my pocket and I'm trying to decide what to get for lunch. Well, if I've only got $10, I can go get a meal from Chipotle, or I can get Chick-fil-A. Well, if I go to Chipotle, what did I not, and I get a burrito bowl or whatever, what did I not get with that $10? I didn't get, my spicy chicken sandwich or whatever it is from Chick-fil-A, right? And if I like those spicy chicken sandwiches more, well, now my cost was really high, right? I gave up something I actually would have liked more than what I ended up eating for lunch. So whatever you're giving up, that's your opportunity cost. TikTok used another example. What am I what am I doing with my time? Um, watching dumb TikTok videos. What could I have done with that time? I don't know, cleaned my apartment. Uh, I don't know, looked at my finances. Whatever it is. Maybe if I'm really good, online poker, make some money. I don't, whatever I'm giving up, whatever I'm not doing with that time that I'm wasting on TikTok, that's my opportunity cost. So, we'll think of this opportunity cost typically in terms of what could I have done with that time? Okay. So another really good example is, like, let's say you have a friend and they're like, oh, I've got this free ticket to this concert for some band that you like over at Ruoff. Like, let's go over there. Okay. Well, I was supposed to work tonight. I definitely want to go. The concert ticket's free, so I'm going to go. The cost is zero, right? Well, no. If you called off work, by going to that free concert, what did you give up? Well, you could have made however much you would have made at a shift at work, right? So it's really costing you. Let's say I could have made, I don't know, $100 working that evening. It cost me $100 because I am no longer able to work and make that $100 in that time, and I'm out that $100. So even things that look free have like free sticker prices. If they take some of your time, you're giving up, doing something else, making money. There's still a cost to it, right? So no such thing as a free lunch, right? So, you know, mouse, cheese, it's free. Well, is it really? What's the cost of taking the free cheese? Relatively high. I know, a little bit different than our time example, but stupid cartoons to kind of make the slides a little more interesting. So we've got another way, I think, of understanding opportunity costs that usually can be a little more relatable, I think, hopefully for you. Now, hopefully all of you have made your apartment decisions for the fall by now, because I think otherwise you'd have a pretty tough time from my memory of how the student apartment market goes. But let's say we have 3 apartments. And let's say that I like them all equally. They have the exact same amenities. Every feature about these apartments is exactly the same. If that was the case, and this is how much the rent is at each apartment, which one should I choose if I'm self-interested and rational? Well, which of these has the lowest cost? Apartment C. But what would I do if everything about these apartments is the same, right? Same square footage, same, you built in the same year, same, appliance, everything. However, they're different distances from campus. Well, I think we can intuitively start to think through, well, which of these do you think is probably closest to campus? They're otherwise identical apartments. Why would apartment A be able to charge a higher rent? Because generally people like to be closer to the buildings that they're going to have to walk to every day. So if apartment A is closer, B is a little further away, C is even further away, why do they have, why can they get away with charging a higher rent? Well, because we start to think about what is the total cost, right? Not just the rental cost, but what if we factor in the time I'm going to have to give up by living at each of these apartments? So if every month, you're a 5-minute walk from campus, if every month living at each one of these apartments you'd have to give up a different amount of time, here apartment A would have the lowest opportunity cost because you're giving up the smallest amount of time by living there. Now, if I live out of apartment C, yeah, rent is cheaper, but I'm giving up 3 times as many hours, right? So that opportunity cost would be 3 times as high. So let's just assume for a second I valued my time at $10 an hour. That's how much I would pay to get an additional hour every day, right? To do something, whatever I enjoy doing. Well, we could then compute what's the total opportunity cost of each one of these apartments, because apartment A, we said we would lose 12 hours by walking back and forth, apartment B, 24, etc. So here I can kind of see the apartment further away has a higher opportunity cost. So if I was just looking at the rent, I might think I should be choosing apartment C. That's self-interested. I'm spending the least amount of money. But if I factor in the opportunity costs, my total cost would be the rent plus the value of the time I'm giving up. So now which of these apartments actually has the lowest cost? The lowest total cost would be apartment B. Okay. So this is just kind of a small little example that kind of goes to show if we don't factor in opportunity costs, we might make the wrong decision. We would choose to live in apartment C, which actually wouldn't be self-interested because we'd be worse off, because the lowest possible total cost when we factor in the opportunity cost would actually be to choose apartment B. Okay. Any questions on this before I keep moving here? So what if I valued my time a little bit more at $20 an hour? Well, before we even go through the math, which apartment is going to start to be more attractive if I value my time a lot? Apartments that are closer, right? Where I'm giving up less of my time. So if I do the computation, instead of $10 an hour, I do 20, notice, oh yeah, now these apartments that are really far away from campus, the opportunity cost is a lot higher than the one that's really close. So now when I factor in those opportunity costs, add that to the rent, my total cost now is lowest at apartment A. So this just kind of goes to show, like, those opportunity costs are generally driven by how much time is valued. And once we factor in those opportunity costs, it can dramatically change our self-interested decision. Everybody with me so far? So we're going to use this apartment example just as a setup, but I've got a better one, I think, in a second. How do we determine marginal costs? So when people make decisions, you make decisions based off of additional costs and benefits, right? So we'll go into this a little more detail. I think starting next class, I'll kind of revisit this. But the idea is, as I do more of something, right, as I put more of my time towards things, I first give up, whatever. Let's say the first hour I put towards studying, I take the hour that I wasn't going to do anything that I really valued. But if I want to study 10 hours, well, now I'm going to have to start giving up things like, oh, maybe I can't go to the gym today. Maybe I can't, go to, I don't know, go meet my friends out at some restaurant or some bar, whatever it is, right? So generally, we think of costs are increasing, but it's not our total costs. Each hour has an additional cost. So this word marginal means additional. So let's think about, what if I have this apartment set up? I think I went back to having the valuation at $10 an hour to get the opportunity cost, and then rent was a thousand, right? Or maybe I didn't, yeah, commuting costs and rent. Okay. So I've got my total costs. If I'm currently in this apartment where I'm paying $1,120, if I choose to move to apartment 2, what would the additional cost be? So let's assume maybe these apartments have different amenities. All right, maybe apartment 2 is in a complex that has a pool and my current apartment doesn't. I paid a lot of money for that on a day like today, right? But let's just say that's the idea, that it has different amenities. I'm moving to the second apartment. Well, the additional costs, or the change in my total cost from that decision, would be, I'm paying $120 more. Now, what if I move to apartment 3? Well, there, what is the change in my total cost? I'm going from 1,120 to 1,360. There, my marginal cost would be 240. So all of it, when we're calculating marginal costs, it's just the change in that total cost. Okay. Excuse me. So we can think about not just like in the idea of moving an apartment, but what's the marginal cost of studying an additional hour? Well, it's however much I value my time, right? The additional cost would be, what did I give up in that hour, and how much would I have paid to have that back, right? What about if I'm driving, right? Well, I can think about the additional costs, like of every mile I drive is going to be, some function of whatever the current price of gas is, right? So to use one more gallon of gas, my marginal cost would be the price of a gallon of gas. Right? What if I buy one more textbook? The marginal cost is whatever the price of the textbook is. So a lot of the times, especially in some of these early examples, our marginal cost will simply end up being the price of a good. We also have marginal benefits. Nothing really crazy here. I'll kind of give a couple examples, but marginal cost means the additional cost. Marginal benefit means it's the additional benefit associated with making a certain decision. So what's the marginal benefit of accepting a job offer? Whatever my annual salary is, right? That's the additional benefit. Right? Now, that's if I start out not working. What would the marginal benefit be of accepting a job offer if I currently have a job? It would be the difference between those two salaries. Right? What about working an additional hour? Well, whatever my hourly wage rate is. What about selling one more gallon of gas? Well, the benefit to a company, if they sell something, would be whatever its price is. So this is where it gets kind of tricky. We'll start to look at different examples, and we'll start to think about the individual, what we end up calling the consumer, but then also firms. So for individuals, sometimes something is a marginal cost, like the price I have to pay for a gallon of gas. But for the firm, their marginal benefit is the price of a gallon of gas. And then we kind of go down to a couple more examples, but what's the marginal benefit of being an economics instructor? Well, it may not be measurable all the time, like easily in dollars, but there's a certain amount of joy and happiness it brings me to kind of teaching, right? I enjoy the interaction with students. I enjoy teaching people economics. And so, sometimes it's hard to measure the marginal benefits. It's not always easy to put a dollar amount to it, but there is some level of happiness, or what we'll eventually call utility. What about the value of a better view? Well, once again, hard to put a real dollar amount onto it, but if we look at real estate prices, look at a house that's not like one street off the beach and one that is right on the beach. How much more are people willing to pay for that one right on the beach? A lot, because the value of a better view, waking up, without a house in front of you, to see the sunrise or sunset at night over the ocean, people have a huge marginal benefit. Right? That will bring people a huge marginal benefit. And then down to my last one, what about consuming an additional beer? That's what leads me to the last thing I want to kind of make sure we go through, looking at this dot cam and answering that last question in the quiz. So let's go here, make sure we can get the dot cam working today. All right, there we go. So a lot of times in class, and I'll do this usually not just at the end, throughout class, we'll talk about something. I'll work through some examples in the slides, but then I might draw something to kind of go along with it. So let's think about if I had kind of the quantity of beer, or this is like the number of beers that I'm going to consume. Oh, this, hold on. Why that setting was set. All right, there we go. So let's say it's a day like today. It's super hot. The lights just turned off on me, so I guess I need to move around a little bit more since they're motion censored. Okay, so hot day like today, I mow the lawn, I get done. I'm like, man, I wish I had beer. My neighbor's got a fridge full of it. And he goes, yeah, I know you really want one. How much would you pay me for that first beer, right? Well, man, on a 95-degree day after mowing the lawn for an hour and a half, I think I might pay you exactly how much I would benefit, which I could put a dollar amount to, like, I don't know, $20. Okay. So my marginal benefit it would bring me a lot of happiness to have a first ice cold beer after mowing the lawn today. Well, after I drink the first, how much would I pay for the second? Well, I mean, I've kind of already quenched my thirst a little bit. Still kind of hot. I still like beer. So maybe I'd pay $10 to my neighbor for that second beer. Right? Like that's the benefit that second beer would bring me. And then, well, what about the third? Okay, well, I don't know. Pay a little bit less. I'm really starting to cool down now. I'm starting to get, I don't really need to cool anymore. Well, what about the fourth? Maybe I'm down to like, I don't know. It's the middle of the afternoon. I still have to work. I can't be getting drunk, so maybe I won't pay, near as much for that fourth beer. So the idea here is, and we'll end up talking about this in a subsequent chapter, but usually we can look at marginal benefits. As I have more of something, the marginal benefit or how much I'm willing to pay for it is declining, right? So the marginal benefits we typically think of as I buy more of something or have more of it, the very first one brings me the highest marginal benefit, and then it kind of decreases from there. To make an extreme point, let's think about like if you had a laptop, right? You pay a lot of money for that first one, but why don't most people have two laptops? Because the benefit that a second one brings them is almost nothing, right? If I already have one, I can do everything I need to do. Having a second one, I don't know, maybe I can keep one at home, one at work, but like it doesn't really bring me that much additional benefit. And so it might fall, its marginal benefit might decrease really fast. Okay? And then how do we make optimal decisions? So how many beers am I going to buy from my neighbor in this example? Well, generally, in some of these models, we'll kind of start out with a simplifying assumption, and we'll kind of start out with an easy constant marginal cost. So let's say my neighbor says, look, I'm going to charge you $5 for every beer that you take out of my fridge. How many of them do you want? Well, if the first one brings me an additional benefit of 20, and I only have to pay 5 for it, what's like my net gain there? You could kind of think about, be like $15. Well, what about the second? What would like my net benefit be there? 5. This one would be what? 1. This one would be what, -3. Well, why would I choose to do something if it provides me with a negative net benefit? I would only ever choose to buy another beer in this example or buy another product, whatever we're looking at, if the net benefit is positive. When I say net benefit, what am I really saying? The difference between marginal benefits and marginal costs. When would the net benefit be positive? Anytime the marginal benefit is greater than my additional cost. So we know that people will choose to do something or choose to buy one more unit of something, choose to consume one more beer in my example here, if, oh, no, I exit out of that quiz, didn't I? So we'll go back here, kind of get things wrapped up. And this is where I might not always be as nice to show you this, but it's day one. This is an easy quiz. when the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost, that's when people will choose to buy one more of something or choose to do, a certain action. Okay. So this will be kind of how we typically have these in class. I'll work through all the questions on these daily quizzes. I'll make them available even as we're covering them in class, right? So that as we're talking about it, you could even answer them. But then kind of, always make sure that we work through them. So here we've got marginal cost being less than the marginal benefit, or said differently, marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost. And we said the research paper was the one that was not part of it. So should be easy points for this first participation quiz. Once again, I'll kind of put them so you can find them under the module that they're kind of related to. We'll wrap up module 1 tomorrow. Should be able to do it within the first 10, 15 minutes of class, really. And then we'll kind of jump into module 2. So usually that module 2 reading would be due before we start class tomorrow. This is going to be the one time where it's not due until we start class on Wednesday, just to make sure people have enough time to kind of get registered for Top Hat, access that module 2 reading, and answer those questions before we cover it in class. Okay. All right. We'll kind of end it there. If there's any other questions, I'll stop the recording now, but feel free to hang around, ask questions. I'll kind of leave it open for like the next 5 minutes.